All right, I think we've got our crowd. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today for Signature Women's Financial Bootcamp webinar. We're so excited to have this talk with you. And of course, we wish we could do it in person, but here we are. Today, our speakers are going to cover wealth building strategies specifically for women. And we will have time for questions at the end, so be sure to add your questions. It's going to be a little icon in the top right corner, and you can add your questions throughout the presentation, and we will address them when we get to the end. Now, before we dive in, we did want to do a little background on Signature FD, so you guys kind of know who we are and what we believe and what we do, and a little bit more about Signature Women and the community as a whole. At Signature FD, we believe in helping clients do more with their wealth. And we believe wealth includes more than just the numbers in your portfolio. So you may have seen on our website that we have a lot of content, and a lot of that content does not center on investments only. We have a podcast that talks about everything from healthy mindsets to strategies for building your business, as well as articles that do the same thing. That's because we believe that wealth is not just the dollars in your portfolio. It's your time, it's your health, your mindset, your network. That's why we focus on both the accumulation of more and the achievement of better. Your wealth and your worth. It's this great little nexus that we like to call net worthwhile. And the beauty of net worthwhile is that we don't define it for you, like you may have experienced in some other partnerships with a wealth advisor where they're telling you what you have to do and what your goals should be. We don't define net worthwhile for you. Net worthwhile is whatever matters to you. Our job is just to help you get there. So if your net worthwhile is to grow your business, great. If it's to have a collection of rare antiques, also great. Or if it's simply to have more time doing the things that you love, whatever your net worthwhile is, our job is to help you achieve it. Now, we do this by addressing 4 key pillars: grow, protect, give, and live. We partner with you in these 4 areas to help you bring true wealth fulfillment to your journey. Now, within Signature FD, we have developed these client communities that are catering to the unique needs of each individual. Signature Women specifically is tailored to helping strong women like yourselves grow, protect, give, and live your wealth to the fullest. Today's event, Financial Bootcamp for Women, will offer strategies and tactics for consideration with an aim to help you feel more confident and empowered. That's the wonderful thing about this great team, is that they are here to help you feel good about what you're doing with the wealth that you've worked hard for. Here's the team that I was just referencing. These 4 talented individuals work together hand in hand with you. Paige Hardy is the head of Signature Women, and she's actually the founder of the community. Jamie Gentry, she's been with Signature FD for 20 years. And Megan and Elias, both are planning associates that are all working together for you. Our speakers today are Paige and Jamie. And before I turn it over to them, just another quick reminder that we do have the question box to your top right. So make sure that you enter your questions and we will get to as many of them as we can at the end. Over to you, Paige.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. I do wish I could see your faces. Zoom is great, but nothing is as good as being able to read expressions. So I know if I'm talking too fast, too slow, boring you to death, or just need to move on. But without your expressions, I'm going to do the best I can, so bear with me. We're going to go ahead and dive in. Today, we are going back to basics. During my presentation, I want to accomplish 3 things during my part. First, I want to make sure you are aware of a few of the unique financial challenges that we as women are facing in today's crazy environment. I then want to list a few areas of your financial life that you have got to make sure you're on top of. And lastly, I'm going to try to answer the most difficult, but the most frequent question that we get at Signature Women. And that is, how do I know I have enough? So let's talk about a few of the challenges. These are for mostly working women. While I certainly don't have to remind anyone about the horrific numbers we're living through right now with the number of people out of work, nearly half of our population is now without a job. But women have been hit the hardest, and it may get worse. It's because the industries that women dominate are being hit the hardest, like education, hospitality, healthcare. For example, women held 77% or held 77% of jobs in the education and health sector, 77%, but they lost 83% of the jobs. This pandemic has wiped out so much of the progress that women have made. I mean, just the beginning of this year, we finally surpassed the men in the workforce. Well, not anymore, unfortunately. And on top of this, these are not new statistics, but women in general earn less than men, right? We also spend less time in the workplace because we take time off to raise kids and then sometimes to take care of other family members. And unfortunately, typically when women take time off, it is during their peak income earning years. All this says is that we don't have as much retirement, and we've got to make it last. We also need to remember other challenges that don't just affect women in the workforce, but affect all of us. I mean, we are living longer than men. That's not new. On average, it's 7 years. So our savings have to last longer. Some good news is that the divorce rate is actually going down. After hovering around 50% for years, the millennials have pulled it down to 39%, which is great. But I do, unfortunately, expect this rate to go up higher after the couples have been cooped up together during COVID. Seriously, everyone is expecting that to happen, unfortunately. And the number one reason for divorce is money problems. Number two is infidelity. So number one, money problems. There's so much you can do about the money problem. So I hope that if you're married, you're going to pull a nugget or two out of what we're going to share today. The average age of widowhood is only 59 years of age. I mean, that to me sounds extremely young since I'm older than that. But 59 is just so young. So widows, on average, they're living decades longer than their deceased spouse. And there are still the traditional gender roles. You know, women tend to maintain the household and men tend to maintain investments. And this is changing, thank goodness, but it's not fast enough. So let's talk about this for a second. If you are married, you should definitely have, obviously you do, a joint, I mean, I would think you do, who knows, have a joint checking account with your spouse, joint savings, mortgage together, may or may not, but regardless, in addition, every woman that's married should also have a checking account, their own savings account, and at least one credit card. Not just have the credit card, but use it. Use it, put everything on it, pay it off. This is what's establishing your credit, not just a credit card that's joint with your husband that may just have your name on the card. That isn't going to do it. You need it in your own name. And one thing that a lot of people don't do that I find, usually too late, is you ought to have at least one of the utilities in your name, like have the power in your name or the gas, because it's been hard for some people to establish once they're divorced or they're a widow and they go out and try to establish a new living place. It's really been hard to get co-signers to get their utilities. It's just kind of crazy. So that's another thing to consider. Because in the end, all of us, the majority, 8 out of 10 of us, we are going to be responsible for 100% of our financial life. So you've got to take care of things now instead of waiting until the unexpected happens. There's a statistic that hasn't changed, and I think it's pretty eye-opening. 80% of men die married. 80% of women die single. So it's not an if, something, you have to look into it. You have to take care of yourself financially. So enough about all the challenges we face. There's a lot. But what are some of the things we can do about it? So this is the next slide. Yes, thank you. We need to know what your net worth is, know what you have, and know what you owe. Obviously, this is much easier if you were single, right? But it's harder when you're married. A few years ago, I was working with a woman who owns a gallery in Buckhead, actually. She ran this gallery for many, many years. She didn't make a lot of money, but it broke even. But her husband did make a lot of money, and they lived in a beautiful home, and they had a second home in North Carolina. The husband took care of all the finances, you know, typical, and she took care of the kids as they grew up and the home. I mean, she was a creative one. But then at 71, her husband died. He had a heart attack and just died instantly. So someone introduced us, and I went over to her house, and we sat together, and she explained that financially she was going to be fine financially. She had 2 homes, and they had already paid off the mortgages, and that she had savings for retirement whenever she could have gotten her husband to retire. Well, come to find out, both homes were mortgaged to the hilt. They had used them, or he had put loans on it, using up 90% of the equity. She had no idea. Their investments had all been spent, to almost nothing. No wonder he had a heart attack, is what I was thinking. But thank goodness her oldest daughter could take her in. And I know that that is the last thing she wanted, the last thing I would want. These things happen, guys, all the time. The second one is, not only do you need to know what you have, but know where it is and how do you get to it. Again, this is easy. If you're single, this is primarily for women and couples. If you have investment accounts with your spouse and you know that you're contributing to retirement accounts, know where these accounts are. Okay, so for example, if your husband if y'all have an account with a financial advisor at a Morgan Stanley or a RIA like Signature FD, go to the meetings. Know your financial advisor, please. And I can say from experience that women typically let the husbands go to the meetings. It's very important. Know who to call, so you'll know who to call if something happens. You'll also know if it's going to be a good fit for you if something happens, and get that advisor to know you and know what's important to you. If your spouse self-directs your investments, which happens a lot of times, he's a do-it-yourselfer, know where those accounts are. Are they Fidelity, Schwab, Morgan Stanley, whatever, wherever he goes in and makes his own investments, know how to get in there and what the password is. If something happened, you need to know how to get in, to see what you have, and to take care of it. And if you don't know where or how to get your assets like this or know where to get them, you are certainly not in control at all. The third question is, how much risk am I currently taking? Don't feel bad if you don't know. Many women don't, but do change this. First, the amount of risk you should take is different for everybody, right? It depends on a lot of things. It depends on your time horizon. How old are you? How long until you need to live on this money that's in your portfolio? How long does it have to last you? Are there other assets, other investment sources? And your personality. How much risk can you tolerate and still be able to sleep at night? And unfortunately, we as women can be too conservative. And while this helps us a lot in some areas of life, it doesn't when it comes to investing. Women's portfolios on average have lower returns than men. And one of the biggest reasons is they have too much cash. We tend to hold on to cash. Cash is, you can say it's the riskiest asset out there. And the reason I say that is that it's the only thing that you invest in that you're guaranteed will be worth less in 2 years than it is today. Cash does not keep up with inflation. You have to be invested in something that has the opportunity to grow. So cash is not always king, unfortunately. You always need some liquidity, obviously, but just not too much where it's not working for you if you need the growth. Next one is, how do I minimize the risk I'm taking? Well, first, you must have diversification in your portfolio. Do not have all your eggs in one basket. The asset allocation of your investment portfolio is the biggest driver of your long-term investment success, and it can change over time and needs active rebalancing. And what I mean by that, let's say you're starting with what we call a 50-50 portfolio, 50% in stocks, 50% in bonds or bond type low volatility vehicles. The market takes off. So now your 50% that's invested in stocks is 70% of your portfolio because they've just grown in value. Well, a 70-30, that may be too risky for you in the long run. So you need to sell off some of those gains, sell some of the stocks, reinvest them in non-volatile assets like the bonds, so you're back to 50-50. Well, typically you need an advisor to help you do these things. So that's just one thing that I think you just need to know. Further diversification. You don't only need to have not all stocks or all bonds, but you need to have your stocks in different sectors, different parts of the industry, technology, healthcare, financials. I mean, I know we wish we all had everything in technology at this point. We wouldn't even need this webinar, but you have to have, because they all do things at different times, right? So you need to have not just stocks and bonds, but in your stocks, you need different industries. You also need different sizes. You need to have some large company stocks, some small. We call them large cap, mid cap, small cap. So that's another form of diversification that's really important. But another way you really need that minimizes the risk is, and it's so much easier to say than do, is to take the emotions out of the investing. Your long-term goals should be in black and white, and you need to be able to figure out a way to stick to them. I think when clients hire us, it is the most important thing we can do for our fee. It's help to take the emotion out of it. Think about this year. Think about the market we've just witnessed. On February 16th of this year, Black Thursday, it was the biggest one-day loss since the Great Recession in 2008. Clients were calling, asking if they should go to cash. I'm sure you thought the same thing. Fortunately, every one of our clients has enough cash to carry them through periods like this, so they don't have to sell at the wrong time. And people that did go to cash, I can't imagine, they're probably very upset now, because as of Monday, the market's made up all the gains, made up all the losses, since the first of the year. So here's a question that you definitely need to be able to answer. So we're gonna, thank you, we're on the next slide, perfect. How much are you spending? Well, with COVID, this job has actually become much easier to figure out. It's easier to figure out what you spend is essential and what is not. So take 3 months, take April, May, and June. List on a spreadsheet if you want to do it the old school way, or use mint.com. It's a great budgeting tool. Our clients have access to e-money, which is also a great, and if you don't know, if you're a client on here, we have a lot of them, you're not using e-money, you don't know how to get into e-money, please call your relationship manager. It's a great tool to take advantage of. And some of us, when you do this, will find it shocking, at least I did, to see how much less you can live on without all the dinners out, the entertainment, the travel, good grief, the makeup, the manis, the petties, the hair color. I mean, I'm doing all of those things less, and they really do add up. I think you'll be amazed. And while a lot of you may have more time now at home, take the time to do a few other things to figure out what you're spending and to improve your spending. Review your mortgage rate if you have not done it already. I just refinanced and got 2.5%. It's on a 15-year, but I had 4.5 on a 30, and the payments are not that much worse, pulling it down to a 15. So that was a good thing for me, for sure. Review your insurance. I know you don't want to. No one likes to review their insurance. But revisit like your deductible. If you're in a new home and you don't expect to have a lot of home repairs that are going to cost you, that you're going to need to file a claim, look at your deductible, because your payments really go down if your deductible goes up. Little things like that. I was doing the same thing I'm telling y'all to do. I called about my auto insurance and just wanted to make sure that they had it right, because I had not, knock on wood, had any tickets or anything. But anyway, they told me that there was an online course. Now, I haven't taken it yet, and I will. But there's an online course that you can take that drops, it's going to drop $600 off my car insurance just by taking this online test. So take the time to do these things, and it's worth it. It's so important because this cash flow planning is really the single biggest driver of if you're going to be successful in meeting your retirement goals, right? I mean, it's going to tell you when you can retire, how much you can spend in retirement, how much you need to save for retirement. And this leads me to my next question that I want to talk to you about, which is how much do you need to take care? Like this is the question we get more than, I don't care if you come into us and have 500,000 or 20 million. Every woman we talk to has this question. How much is enough? How much do I need to take care of myself for the rest of my life so I don't have to depend on anyone else? Well, first, let's take the amount you just figured out that you're spending now. Okay? Well, in most cases, this is going to be the same amount you're going to need in retirement. I know some of you will disagree with that. Some think you may need more to fund all the trips with your family that you're planning to take in retirement. Some think you're going to need a lot less because you're not going to have to buy as many clothes and do your hair as often, etc. But honestly, our experience has shown us that while you are going to have lower expenses, you're going to have higher expenses, and healthcare is one that really is huge that you've got to account for. So the safest thing is just when you're doing your planning, assume you're not going to spend less in retirement. So once you come up with that number that you're comfortable with, we can back in to what amount you need to have invested to give you that number. Okay? But first, we need to make some assumptions. We're going to assume that your investments are in a well-diversified portfolio, not 50% in cash. Let's say for simplicity, we're going to have 60% in stocks, growth assets, and 40% in bonds or similar type investments. So you are taking a moderate amount of risk in your portfolio on average. So over time, this 60-40 portfolio should give you a return of about 7% a year. Some years it's higher, and obviously some years it's lower. But if you keep it invested over time, after inflation, which we like to use 3%, because that is the average inflation, not what we're experiencing now, but we're trying to be prepared, you can pretty much count on the ability to withdraw 4% of your portfolio. So 7% is what you're earning, take 3% inflation out, so you can live on 4% of your portfolio every year to meet your expenses. So if you look at this slide that we have up here, what is it telling you? It's telling you that if you need $100,000 a year to live on, $100,000 to spend, and it's coming from your portfolio, you need to have approximately $2.5 million invested in this portfolio. And again, we're using a 60-40 portfolio, taking a moderate amount of risk. You need $200,000 a year. You need to have $5 million invested. Okay? This is just one simple way to look at how much you need to meet your goals. But obviously, you may have other sources of income. Might have Social Security, pension. There are also other tools to use to approach securing your lifetime income that we're not touching on today because we don't have the time. But there are other things that we can talk about when we're trying to make sure that you have what you need in place. And I know numbers like these, when you see them in black and white, are daunting. So I hope, if nothing else, it definitely shows you the importance of having a financial plan. So what we've discussed is what do you have, where is it, how to access it, how much risk are you taking, and how to mitigate some of that risk. and the importance of knowing how much you're spending. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to discuss how to protect what you already have. And then we're going to leave time, as Crystal mentioned, for questions and answers. All right, Jamie, take it over.
Thank you, Paige. That was a lot of great information. I could hear everyone scribbling their notes as we went, and hopefully everyone picked up some good tips. I have the pleasure of starting out talking about insurance, so I'm sure maybe I've already lost some of you guys, but I promise to keep this limited to the items that we see as some common traps, I will call them, or gaps in coverage where people just really don't think about, the type of insurance they need to have covered. So we have our insurance broken down. I'm going to first start with property and casualty. And for those of you that don't know, in-house at Signature FD, we do have a whole team of people that review and underwrite and serve as agent on property and casualty policies. If a review of your policies is something that you have not taken advantage of, we are happy to look at that, even if it's staying with your own carrier. Sometimes there's a lot of things to look at. So I didn't put a lot of emphasis on the homeowners, the auto, watercraft, but I did want to spend some focused time talking about a couple specialty coverage lines. You'll see here as valuable items. So if you think about everything that's in your home, if you were to take your home and flip it upside down, what would fall out? And all of the things that are fixed to, from cabinets to countertops, all of that is going to be included in your homeowner's policy. But the personal property needs its own special coverage. It can break, it can get stolen, it can travel with you and get lost in transit. So it's really important to think about your property and more specifically, think about items that you own that are either going to be valued in excess of your standard policy, your homeowners, or could be specifically excluded. And that can be a whole range of items. I've put some examples here from jewelry and antiques, different collections, firearms. These are things that sometimes need their own special coverage because they could be so valuable. It's common for a standard homeowner's policy to limit a per item jewelry at $2,500. So obviously you see a lot of people insure their rings, engagement ring, any special items, which sometimes, quite frankly, can't be replaced. They are one-of-a-kind items. So in some cases, it does make sense people decide, if it got lost in a fire, it can't really be replaced. So if that's, dollars that you prefer to save on premium, then that can be a discussion with your agent, but that is something special to look for. And then another item on insurance that's really important, we talk to all of our clients about this, is excess liability insurance, or sometimes you might hear it referred to as umbrella insurance. And what excess liability insurance does is it sits on top of your underlying policies, which would be, your homes, autos, boats, and any other property. And if there are ever any liability claims against you, which could be caused from everything from an auto accident, it could be a slip and fall on your property if you have contractors that are working on your home, if you have the neighbor's kids over to swim, and there's some kind of accident with the pool, animal bites, there's kind of some common examples, but there's also some pretty interesting stories on other liability claims that is, it's just the world that we live in, that a lot of people do view people with wealth as targets in some cases. So excess liability is really important. We recommend it for anybody that has assets of greater than $500,000. And the reason that number is kind of a good threshold for planning is because you can typically get liability coverage up to those limits in the underlying policy. So your homeowner, auto, watercraft, it's common that you can get liability limits kind of up in that range. Anything above that is likely going to be best priced with an umbrella or excess liability policy. And we really do recommend that the coverage amount is equal to your net worth. So one of the first item that Paige mentioned was, really take a personal balance sheet approach to your assets. What do you have? What do you owe? Look at the bottom number on that sheet. And, essentially, if it's above 500,000, there should be a conversation occurring on excess liability, either with us, we can connect you with an agent, or we can review your current policies to see if you have it. One really important thing about excess liability is if you do own any assets not in your name. So, for example, if you own your home in a trust, or you have a vacant land in an LLC, anything like that, it's really important that that trust, whatever the entity is that owns that property, is named as what's called an additional insured on all of your policies. There can be a problem if, God forbid, if you come through to a claims process, and if that owner and ownership entity is not listed as what's called an additional insured, you can have a lot of problems. So again, this is getting into some pretty granular things on your property and casualty insurance, but some common traps we do see. The vacant land is another thing. Anything you own, anything that's on your balance sheet has to be listed. Vacant land can be a problem because people can, come on land and do things really without your knowledge, and you really do have that liability as owner. So the last thing, if you have teenagers using social media, that question is really on here just to make sure everyone's paying attention. If you have teenagers, they are of course on social media, and anything posted online can be subject to defamation claims, and that is a common covered claim for excess liability purposes. So the other items that are common for insurance are long-term care, and we could do, and we have done, entire seminars or workshops just on long-term care. So I'm going to hit a couple high points on this, but it is interesting to look at some of the statistics out there for women and in the environment of long-term care needs. And unfortunately, 3 in 4 women will likely need some level of long-term care in the years after age 65. Now, the plan for that can be to self-insure. You can, say, okay, I've looked at my assets. If I think I'll be spending less because I'm in retirement and don't have certain expenses, then I would have other assets available. Maybe I'm spending down some principal as kind of my backup plan. Or do you want to look at purchasing a long-term care policy and effectively transfer that risk to the insurance company? So there's kind of 2 ways to go about that, but it is really important to have a plan. We preach that all the time. And if we haven't started any discussion on long-term care with you, let's definitely start that. Where we typically start looking at options is probably around mid-50 or so. Now, personal experience can change that. We have a lot of clients, and we hear a lot of stories where someone has helped with care with their parents, or gone through a long-term care need where maybe there was or wasn't insurance and there was a really good or bad experience there. And that can certainly translate to different purchase decisions or perspectives on the importance of long-term care. Long-term care, it's important to say that it's kind of not old people insurance. So there is a very specific definition for qualifying for benefits, and that's what's called activities of daily living, and that's that ADLs that you'll see there. ADLs are everyday things that everyone should be able to do on their own. So that's dressing, bathing, feeding yourself, remembering to take your medicine. If your doctor is certifying that you are unable to do at least 2 of the 6 ADLs, there's a defined set of 6 ADLs, and if you can't do more than 2 on your own, then that triggers your benefit, your qualification for benefit on a long-term care claim. So there's a lot of ways to customize long-term care. It can be expensive, so it is really important. That's another reason it's important to have a plan, and we will often factor in that expense into cash flow planning that Paige was mentioning. So there's a lot of levers, if you will, of bells and whistles that you can add or take off if you are trying to target a kind of a specific area of premium. So those are listed there. If there is any, if you have any assets identified on your net worth statement that is a old life insurance policy that maybe has some cash value in it, or an annuity that was purchased, even if it's a small annuity, anything that has cash value, you'll see there a planning tip. And there are some really interesting strategies now involved where we can exchange life insurance cash value or annuity cash value and use that towards a long-term planning, long-term care policy. So if you do identify any of that on your balance sheet and long-term care is on your mind, then we should definitely talk. I've got two other questions at the bottom there. If you're answering yes to either of these, then it's really important to look at that. Domestic workers is something that is specifically excluded from homeowners policy, so it's important that that would be covered under workers' comp. And then D&O insurance. Anyone that's sitting on a board, sitting on your HOA or COA for condos, this would be something that sometimes can be covered by the association. And if not, you definitely need to be reaching out to your agent to get covered on that. So those are the main items there. There's a lot of protection, also designed from insurance standpoint to look at life insurance as well as disability insurance. Disability really applies for everyone that's working, and there's a lot of benefits there in your group benefits for that. But I did want to touch on a lot of the items underneath life insurance, looking at the two main types. There's two main types of insurance, and for those of you that own insurance, this may sound familiar, but term insurance is probably the most common, definitely the most common these days. There are also permanent policies that hold some cash value. They tend to be a lot more expensive. That's why the term policies are much more popular these days. But the answer of the right kind depends on what your goals are. And most commonly, term insurance is used to fill the gap of employment income that hasn't yet been earned, that is being used for retirement savings. So if you are identifying in any scenario where your employment income is actively being used to accomplish some of your future goals, then term insurance is really important to look at. And you can look at doing a couples, not a couples policy, but if you are in a relationship and you're really wanting to fund both of your incomes protect both of your incomes, then you can look at doing a life insurance review together is helpful. Permanent insurance would be more appropriate if you are trying to leave a set amount of assets to your children or other heirs, or ensure that there is liquidity upon death. And that can be important for a lot of different reasons. Currently, we're in a estate planning environment where estate taxes, the exemption is so high, that's kind of less important. So that landscape does tend to ebb and flow. So that could become more popular in the future, possibly. But it is important that liquidity can be accessed at your heirs at death, not just for managing the estate, but funding other obligations without having to sell assets. So that could be important too. Any existing life insurance? So this is a question that we get very commonly. We'll start working with somebody, or they'll start reviewing their assets and say, oh, I have this old policy. Do I still need it? Again, as I mentioned with long-term care, there could be a planning strategy there. If you have any existing life insurance policies, but you're not really sure what to do with them, give us a call. You'd be surprised. We've had some really interesting case reviews come through where you can really kind of restructure that type of asset to maybe a more applicable goal. So moving on, I've got two slides here on tax savings, and the tax component of, the income tax structure has really limited people's abilities to save on taxes. We all love saving money, and gosh, isn't it the best to save money on taxes? So I've listed a couple things here that are really kind of like very common things to look at that tend to apply for everybody, whether you're working or not. But you'll see they're kind of above the line and below the line. That's just the line, so to speak, is your AGI, or adjusted gross income. So above the line deductions are the most beneficial. They are reduced off the top line of your income before any tax calculations are done. And below the line deductions still are beneficial, but not as beneficial as above the line deductions. Social Security benefits, if you are, if you're working, or if you're if you're paying into the Social Security system, you have what's called your work record. It's really important to, confirm that work record. But if you're planning for the timing of when to take Social Security, I would say that's the number 2 question we get. If we get the question about how much do I have, how much is enough, I would say the number 2 question we get is about Social Security and the timing of when to take that. So we do a lot of cash flow planning around that. But if you're still working, or if you plan to still be working while you're on benefits, retirement benefits, then that could be something just to keep an eye out for, because you do have a reduction in benefits up until a certain age. So that's something to look at, so that you're not dinged with additional taxes. Health savings accounts are another item that are available. These have become more common recently because there's been a trend for health insurance plans to be structured more with the high deductible plans. And so with the high deductible plans, there's obviously more cost to the insureds, whether that be a higher deductible, a family limit, out of cost, or co-insurance is what they call it. Those costs just seem to be going up and up. So if you do have the ability to do an HSA account, definitely sign up for it. I listed the maximum amounts here. You don't have to do the maximums, but they are available, and you get a nice catch-up provision if you're 50 or older. Record keeping, this is really, really important. This also is very, very boring and dry material. But if you have any appreciated assets that have capital gains, you really do need to watch your basis, because ultimately that basis is what determines the taxable component of a future transaction. 1035 exchanges as well, that could come into play with some of the insurance rollovers or property exchanges. Another big thing that has, another big question that's come up over the past year has been in response to the change in the tax structure. And essentially what happened starting in 2018 is the income tax structure moved everybody off. Well, they increased the standard deduction amount to $12,000 per taxpayer. So when that happened, there were instantly millions of people that came off of Schedule A or itemized deductions and started taking the standard deduction. So we do get asked a lot of times, should I still track essentially what were the itemized deductions? And I've listed those there for everybody. We recommend to still track those, your CPA, or even if you're self-preparing, it's still important to do a side-by-side comparison, which you won't really know until the end of the year. But if you have more than 12,000, which would be the standard deduction, it's going to be beneficial to itemize. So you've probably heard, a lot of kind of news, around changes in taxes, and a lot of that has been around the deduction limit. I did list 2 credits here. This may not apply for everybody, but make sure if you've got child and dependent care expenses, make sure you're taking care of or applying for that benefit. And then also another common tax strategy has been around Georgia film credit. So I think a lot of us have seen the production crews, not so much with COVID recently, but Georgia's been a huge base for production, and where that comes into benefit for Georgia taxpayers. Typically, we're looking at Georgia film credits if your Georgia tax is in excess of 25,000 is a good kind of number to target. So if you look on your Georgia tax return and your taxes are higher than that, then you could benefit from the Georgia tax credits. Otherwise, it's really not kind of worthwhile. You do have a K-1 and some other complexities. Tax savings, as far as retirement savings, is a big one. If you're working and you have any options for pre-tax savings, that's the first dollars you should be maximizing up to the limits, whether that's a 401k. Everybody, whether you're kind of with an employer or you're self-employed, can do an IRA. I've listed the limits there. Those tend to be kind of notching up now year to year. So just make sure if you are maxing that you adjust your maximum every year. We'll be getting the new limits here for 2021 here shortly. Another tax savings that could apply, and this really depends on your tax rate. So if you have some years coming up where you think you're going to be low income or lower income relative to where you are, a conversion of your traditional IRA to a Roth is an excellent strategy. We have a lot of really happy clients that have are either in process of doing that. It's kind of a multi-year strategy, but if you do have IRA assets and you're looking at some low income years coming, over kind of in the foreseeable future for you, let's definitely talk, because there's a lot of strategies that we can do around that. And then for those of you that may be self-employed, I put a couple options there on tax savings, whether that's savings into retirement plans or your health insurance premiums as our deductible. So make sure to take advantage of that. Investment strategies, again, we could do a whole workshop on this, so I won't spend too much time on this, but Paige mentioned a couple items in terms of structuring your risk position or risk tolerance in the portfolios. There's a couple things that we can do in addition to that, still within that structure, but you will see items on your 1040 for tax-exempt interest and qualified dividends. That's something that, if it's appropriate, we can put into the portfolios or take out of the portfolios. And then asset placement is a big one. Paige talked about kind of how much you would have in stocks and within each sector, and then bonds. But where you place those assets can make a big impact. So the same diversification strategy that you would have, you can strategically put more growth in, say, tax-deferred accounts and more income-oriented securities outside of those tax-deferred accounts. And that really helps keep a lot of the tax efficiency in the right place or in the right type of accounts or vehicles. So that's a big one. And then tax loss harvesting. This is something that if you're, self-managing your portfolio would probably be a little bit more tricky, but this is something that we always do look for opportunities. We did a lot of tax loss harvesting for capital losses when the market crashed earlier this year. So essentially that's creating a tax asset that you can use to offset future gains. So the last slide I've got here is just to hit a couple high points on the estate planning. And estate planning is really important whether you're single or married. In Georgia, if you are single and you have a will and then you get married, your will become invalid. So essentially, it's almost as if you didn't have a will. So if you are planning to get married, recently married, or have been married for a while and just never did your wills together, please hear me now, call your attorney. We are happy to sort of help facilitate those discussions or to help you prepare for those meetings. So that's a big thing. The number one thing that your estate planning attorney will probably want to see as, in your first consultation is going to be a inventory of your assets. So again, going back to Paige's number one planning tip there, top of the list is to know what you have. That's a document that you can use in so many areas of your planning. So when you're looking at your estate planning, it's really important to know who will manage your affairs if you become disabled or incapacitated. There are trusted people that are going to be appointed to legal positions, power of attorney or an agent in fact. You need to know who are the people that you trust. That could be someone in your family. It doesn't have to be. It can be a family friend. It doesn't even have to be anyone local. I mean, really before COVID, there was a lot of electronic business occurring, but even now, so even more, there's a lot of ability for people to be able to manage effectively from afar. So think about your agent. Think of, and those would be typically people that are working on your behalf during lifetime. And then after death, you need to think about who you want your executor to be. Everyone needs an executor and you need successors. Trustees are only important if you have trusts. So that's going to be, specific to someone's plan, depending if that's applicable or not. But don't forget about successors. I see a lot of wills where they just name their agent and there's no backups. I've also been in some scenarios where the trustee passed away and there was no successor trustee listed. So things do happen. There are people that you think might want to serve, and then when it comes time, they just, they decline for some reason. So we always recommend to have 2 successor agents as well as 2 successor appointments within the estate for the executors and the trustees. So there's a short list here of what you need. So it's really sounds simple, but this is probably between insurance and estate. These are the two items that people definitely put off. So we spend a lot of time talking about them and reminding people. So the three items that are kind of in a basic will package are your last will and testament, your power of attorney, and what's called an advance directive for healthcare. Some of the terms of documents have changed over the years, depending on when Georgia's done updates. Georgia did a power of attorney update in 2018. If you're on the old form, it's a lower priority. If that's the only thing that needs to be updated in your estate, it's probably not worth, the time and expense. But if you have something come up, or if it's an easy, email to your estate planning attorney to update, the old form is perfectly fine. The new form covers things like electronic commerce, accessing electronic records, like anything that would be going through a username, password. Most people are doing business that way. So the new Georgia attorney form is helpful in those ways. However, the advanced care directive, there was an update on that document in 2007. There's still a lot of will packages that were drafted and executed before 2017 out there. I'm sorry, 2007. If you have not moved from what was the healthcare power of attorney to what is now the advanced directive for healthcare, that's very, very important. There are a lot of statistics out there about chances of accidents as opposed to death, and the high likelihood for there to be more of an accident than a death. So there's a strong argument that documents like your advanced directive and power of attorney are almost more important than a will. And a lot of people, when they hear estate planning, they think that that's only, about a will. So just putting some emphasis there for you. And then I've got a little asterisk on the beneficiary designations, because it's not actually a document, but it's a designation that would be on plans and accounts, such as retirement savings plans, as well as life insurance. So beneficiary designations are just as critical as a will. You can have a will that covers assets that are going to be subject to probate, and then you will have assets if you have retirement savings that are not subject to probate, and that's where the beneficiary designations come into play. Lastly, there are some special situations that could have additional documents. So that would be trusts, which could be a life insurance trust, gifting strategies. That's another item there. So if you have any special circumstances, between your attorney and the discussion with us, then we can definitely identify if that's appropriate. And having a distribution for your personal property is really important. That technically could be covered under your will, but there's going to be a lot of stuff inside your home that if it's important for special things to go to specific people, make sure you have that in writing. So that is everything that I've got to cover. I will go back or pass it back off to Crystal. I think she's got the Q&A questions that might have come in that she can go through. Thank you.
I do, actually. We had a few come in during your presentation, so I'm going to toss the first one out. How do I start a financial conversation with my partner? Paige?
Yeah, so I think the best way to do it is to say, what happens to me if if you got hit by a car tomorrow or something happened to you? I would already be going through so much emotions of losing you that I can't imagine how hard the financial part of it would be. So I'd really like to understand what we have and what we owe, so I'm more prepared.
That's really great. I love that answer, Paige. Another question we got is a little bit on the same topic. What should you do if you have not had those conversations with your spouse and you are separating?
Make a copy of every single thing you can get your hands on, is what I say. If you're separating and you haven't done that, I mean, if things go south and you end up divorcing or having to come up with an agreement to live apart and have your own finances, you have to know what you have. And the only way sometimes to do that is to get copies, snoop. I'm serious, go in, make copies of every single thing you can find and get your hands on. And you may have to take all of that to your attorney or call Jamie or call myself and we can help you go through it. That's the best I can say to that.
Another one that we have is if we have not established credit, and you mentioned getting a credit card, but what if you're separating and you have not established credit yet and you need to get a place?
It's going to be harder. I had a client the other day that's renting, and she didn't have any credit, so she had to put down 3 months of rent in order for the person to rent to her. The utilities came up. Some you can get without credit, and some you may have to have a co-signer on. So the only thing I can tell you is to apply for 1 or 2 credit cards right now. Make sure you go into the bank, have your own account, get to know a banker so they can help you. They may help you get a credit card if you're banking with them. That might be a route to go.
That's excellent. And our last question actually leads us to our next point. Somebody asked how they can get a hold of you guys if they want to meet with you. So and we're going to talk a little bit about how to get started on your own if you'd like, and then I'll have the contact information come up after that. Paige?
Yeah, great. Okay, so basically, how do you get started? It's really what we've already told you. I mean, just put together a summary of your assets. So you have a balance sheet that shows, just do a net worth statement, and you can Google net worth statement, personal financial statement, and you'll get a blank form. So start filling all that out, and then make a list of your expenses. That was really eye-opening for me, listing all of mine on how much I spend that I shouldn't. And I think what's so important is put all your important documents together, get them organized. My father passed away earlier this year, and he was organized, and I'm still working on it. That was February, and it is September. It is so important to ask yourself that question. If something happened to you tomorrow, your kids would step in, maybe. I mean, I'm assuming my boys would step in, so I have made a file that has got every single thing he would ever need to take care of everything if something happened to me. If whoever's asking this question wants to talk more in detail, call me. We have lists of things, and I can help you with that. I think just live through it. And so that's it, guys. Just take control. Please take control, because like I said, 80% of us are going to have to, whether we like it or not. And we would love to help y'all. So please feel free to call us with anything. And if you have people you care about, friends and family, that they need to have some guidance and they need to pull get their information together, please refer them to us. That's how we grow our business, is from client referrals. So we'd really appreciate to be able to help anybody that you care about.
Thank you so much, Paige, for that offer.
Okay.
And I've got all 4 of their contact information, their emails up. So for anyone who is interested, as the question mentioned, you are more than welcome to reach out, or you can respond directly to the emails you've received regarding this event. Paige, you want to close this out?
Just thank you. Thanks to everybody for attending. We're here working hard. May not always be in the office, but we're always at our home office. So we're still working as usual. Thank you again for joining us. Talk to you soon, hopefully. Hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye.